Hey guys, today we are going to be focusing on one of the most important outcomes of the Protestant and Catholic Reformations, and that is the wars of religion that result from the split of Christianity following Martin Luther. No, that's bad. So I'm going to walk you now through some of the major religious conflicts that occur during this time period. And the first major one is called the Smalkaldic War, which occurs from 1546 to 1548. The basic problem in this that leads to this war is that many German princes within the Holy Roman Empire convert to Protestantism, and they form a military alliance called the Smalkaldic League. They do this to defend themselves against possible attack by Catholics. This is likely because the ruler of the Holy Roman Empire, Charles V, is a Catholic, and he remains loyal to Rome. What happens to cause the war is that both sides distrust each other, and they begin to prepare for war. The Protestants strike first, but the Catholics ultimately win this war. As a result, Charles V tries to force all of the German princes to convert back to Catholicism, but this fails and leads to widespread revolts and almost to a renewal of hostilities. And so instead, Charles V accepts that the princes are going to stay Protestant, and they sign the Peace of Augsburg. And the Peace of Augsburg is really important because it recognizes the religious diversity within the Holy Roman Empire. And it allows the princes within the Holy Roman Empire to decide whether they want to be Catholic or they want to be Protestant. This seems like the beginning of religious toleration, but we still have a long way to go. In England, there are some similar issues going on. So you will remember that Henry VIII converted England to Protestantism, his own unique blend of beliefs. So Henry did have a son after, going through 6 wives, and his son, Edward the Sixth, turns out to be kind of a weakling, and he dies very young. And this allows Henry VIII's Catholic daughter, Mary I, to take the throne. And so Mary I marries a Catholic king of Spain, Philip II, and she returns England to Catholicism. This upsets a lot of people, and all of the Protestants in England begin speaking out against her. In response to this, Mary begins persecuting all of the Protestants in England, and she ends up burning more than 280 people to death for heresy during her short reign of only 5 years. After Mary dies, her sister, Elizabeth I, is allowed to take the throne. And Elizabeth I is a Protestant, and she returns England to Protestantism and begins passing anti-Catholic laws. She makes it a crime punishable by death to try and convert people to Catholicism. Another thing that happens because of this is the Spanish king, the one who Mary I married, believes that he deserves to rule England, and he begins to prepare to invade England and convert it back to Catholicism by force. This leads the Spanish king to attempt to invade England in 1588 with the Spanish Armada, and this is a big deal that we'll talk about more later, but just to make it short, it doesn't work out. England remains Protestant, and Catholics are more or less eliminated from English political life. Another big problem that's going on during this time period is in France. And the basic problem here is that the French king and many of his supporters are staunch Catholics. But many towns in France, and also a lot of important noblemen, convert to Protestantism. And this leads to violence when a Protestant plot to get rid of the king is discovered. And this leads to armed conflict between Protestants and Catholics. The civil war that results in France because of this is extremely complicated and goes on for, as you can see, a really long time. And it doesn't end until this guy, Henry IV, inherits the throne. And he sees that it's really going to be impossible for one side or the other to win. And so what he does is he passes this thing known as the Edict of Nantes. And the Edict of Nantes declares religious toleration in France. And it says that France is going to remain one kingdom, but that anybody in France can be either Catholic or Protestant, and that either one is okay. So this is an important step towards religious toleration. And while the Edict of Nantes is in place, Protestants and Catholics live peacefully together in France. So the main conflict, and the one that finally brings an end to this age of religious warfare, is the 30 Years' War, which goes from 1618 to 1648. And the basic problem here is that even after almost 60 years of conflict, the Holy Roman Emperors still believe that they could bring back people to Catholicism through forced conversion. And so in 1618, the Holy Roman Emperor begins to try and convert all of the empire back to Catholicism. Of course, the Protestants don't like this, and they respond violently to these attempts. So the war begins as just another war between the Holy Roman Emperor and certain Protestants within the Holy Roman Empire. But this time the war spreads out, and as time goes on, more and more people join in. So eventually Spain joins in to help the Catholics, and then people from Scandinavia and France join in to help the Protestants. And every time it seems like the war is about to be over, somebody else joins in, until just about all of Europe is fighting in this war. And it seems like it's never going to end. But it does eventually end, but it ends as a stalemate. Basically, both sides realize that it's impossible to win, and that you're never going to be able to get rid of a religion through fighting a war against it. So they reach a peace. This peace is known as the Peace of Westphalia, and this gives complete religious freedom to the German princes and more or less destroys the power of the Holy Roman Empire. The Holy Roman Emperor no longer really has any control over what the German princes do. One other result of this is that Spain, which had been the most powerful nation at the beginning of the 30 Years' War, is more or less bankrupt. And France, who made some good decisions and ended up joining the right side in the war towards the end, becomes really powerful and gains a bunch of territory. Let's recap. We've looked at a couple conflicts, and there were a lot more that we haven't talked about. But what are the main outcomes of this century of war? Well, first of all, it's the worst disaster in Europe since the Black Death. And if we just look at one place, the place that was hit the hardest by the war, Germany, the population drops from 15 million to 11 million during the years of 1600 to 1648. So that's almost 4 million people, almost 1/3 of the population, dead due to this war. Another result is that really not very much changes in terms of the religious composition of Europe. A few territories change back to being Catholic, but really the split between Protestants and Catholics remains the same. And this just goes to show that you can't really control people's beliefs through violence. If anything, the split between Protestants and Catholics becomes even starker because of all of the warfare and violence and anger. There are some big shifts in political power that result from this war. So Spain and the Holy Roman Empire decline, while France and England emerge powerful and unharmed. And so this is a big shift in European politics. And we're going to see France and England go on to become ever more powerful as Spain and the Holy Roman Empire sink into more or less non-importance. And finally, we begin to see ideas of religious toleration. And this makes sense because people are starting to think, hey, why do we have to kill each other? Why can't we just be Protestants and Catholics living in the same country? So kings begin to realize that religious diversity exists and that they can't change this fact through laws or through warfare. And philosophers and intellectuals begin to argue that religious toleration makes sense. And this idea is going to catch on and become even more important in later time periods, and we'll see it embodied even in the United States political tradition. That all starts here as a result of these religious wars. All right, so there you go. Hopefully you can now answer these questions. If you can't, go back and check out those slides with a little bit more attention to detail.